Dynamic data web applications have one simple goal: to provide an easy way to build web pages that provide standard operations on database data. If you have ever created a data-driven application, you know that a substantial portion of the work is repetitive. Say that you have a few tables in the database: the customers table, the products table, and the shippers table. First, you write code to access the database. Then you create a form to input new data into a products table, another form to edit existing products. Next, you create a form to show all the products and probably one to query the product info. Then you repeat those steps for the shippers table and the employees table and all the rest of the tables inside this database. Dynamic data apps do all this work for you. To create one of these dynamic data applications, I will use File, New, Project. I'll choose Visual C# as my language, then click on the Web node, and then choose this node here, ASP.NET Dynamic Data Entities Web Application. The entities part of this name means that I'm going to use Entity Framework to connect to the database. I'm going to place this in the correct folder on my hard drive and then click OK. Visual Studio adds a number of files to my project. The one I'm going to spend the most of the time in at first is this global.asax. Before I can do any work, though, I need to add a database using Entity Framework. To do that, I'm going to right-click on the web application and choose Add New Item. Next, I'll select the Data node and choose this first item, ADO.NET Entity Data Model. I'll leave the name at the default and then click on Add. Next, it asks me where I'm going to get the information for the Entity Framework, the ORM layer that it's building. I'm going to choose to generate it from a database and then click Next. Now in my application, I've added this data connection in one of the earlier movies. So it shows I already have Northwind40.sdf. If you do not see this, you can create a new connection by clicking here, choosing SQL Server Compact from this list, then choosing the database file by clicking on the Browse button, going out to the exercise files folder, and then opening the assets folder, drilling down into the database folder, and then picking this SDF file. I'll test the connection and then click OK. Now I've got this connection. I am going to create this entity item here called Northwind. I'm going to remove the 40 and call it Northwind Entities and click Next. Visual Studio notices that I'm using a local SDF file and asks if I want to make a copy of it and add it to my dynamic data site. I'm going to say yes. Next, I have to build my object model. This will be the mapping layer between my database tables and my programmatic entities. So what I'm going to do is open this tables node and check this first checkbox. I want all the tables to be added. Then I'm going to change this to say Northwind Model and then click on Finish. I'm going to go ahead and click OK on this message too. Let's review what happened. I created an entity data model using Entity Framework. During that process, a copy of my database file was added to my app_data folder. There was also a change made to my web config file, which you cannot see, but that's where my connection strings are stored for connecting to the database. The next thing I need to do is tell the dynamic data engine how to find my model classes. That code is written in global.asax. I'll double-click on this file to open it. The global.asax file has some standard boilerplate text in here. The code that I'm looking for is here. I will uncomment this code by pressing Control-K and then Control-U. And then you're going to need to modify this so it says your entities. I've already changed it. It says Northwind Entities. That represents my entity model. And then I have a compile error right now. What I need to do is add a using statement to the top of my page for system.data.entity.infrastructure. The way I made this tooltip pop up is I pressed Control period on the keyboard. And now I'm going to touch this with my mouse, and you'll see that it added a line at the top of my page up here. At this point, I think I'm ready to go. Oh, another thing you need to change is you make sure that it says scaffold all tables equal to true. What that's telling the dynamic data site is to look up my classes that are inside this entity and look at every single table that's defined in there and create all of the pages on this website for all the tables in there. Now, if you look at my project, you'll see that I only have one page. I have a default.aspx. I do not have a products table or a shippers table or a customers table. I just have this default ASPX. All the pages you're going to see in a minute are dynamically generated, hence the name of this project type, dynamic data. I'll press F5 to run the application. You might see a dialog popping up saying you need to add a modification to your web.config file. If so, just press yes. Now look at this site. This is my dynamic data site. Every single table in my database has a hyperlink on this page. When I click on the hyperlink, it takes me to the page where I can read the information about my shippers. And while I'm on this page, I can edit the details of the shipper. I'm going to change this name to Speedier Express and then click on Update. That just made a change back to my database. I can then click on this back to home page and do the same thing with my other tables. Here's my customers. Here's my products. Again, I can change these. I can edit them. I can insert new data. Let me show you how to do that. I'll go back to the shippers table. Insert new item. Click on Insert. Now I have this new item in my table, and then later I can delete it by clicking on this hyperlink. Again, this is all code that was written by the Dynamic Data Engine. I'll say OK to this one. It also understands queries. Let me show you that. I go over here and choose my products table. And then here you can see these filters. I can filter by the discontinued products, by categories, and by the supplier. If you're not happy with the way the pages look, you can change the look of the pages without changing the functionality. That is done through templates. I don't have time to show you all the details of this, but the templates live over here in this dynamic data folder. There's content templates, page templates, different kinds of templates in here. If you want to change the templates for the look of the page, you would go to this page templates folder, find the edit or the insert or the list. You'd open these files up and then you'd modify the HTML and the ASPX code that's inside these pages to change the look. Let's say you want to put a different header or change the font size or change some styles. You can do that here. And if you change the edit ASPX page, every single edit page inside the dynamic site picks up the details on this new look. Now that was easy. The basic CRUD work for the database was magically handled by the dynamic data site. This is a flexible system, and you can customize any portion of the generated application.